was that my style works very well with people who think like me and who communicate like me, and with other people who have different styles, perhaps a slower, more contemplative style, or perhaps a more laid-back style, or perhaps a style that is less assertive, that sometimes my style could inhibit them from really fully participating and communicating, and that I wasn't really getting the maximum out of the relationship that I could.
We often end up connecting with people who are more like us. People whose styles are like ours, it's a lot easier. What did you learn about changing then your style when you're talking to someone who isn't built like you are?
Well, changing is always difficult, and I wasn't surprised, but I was committed to the process, and I understand how important it is for the firm to improve as much as possible the communication at the management level. So what I learned was the first step, of course, is to understand the issue. And the 360 feedback helped me focus with much better clarity on some of the specific issues in terms of different styles and communication. Then, following the feedback, I had a coaching session where we went over the feedback and created strategies with the different styles and talked about approaches as to how the communication might improve, and amplified the information on the 360 to give me an understanding of what people with different styles are perceiving and how they're reacting to me, either one-on-one or in a room or in the dynamic within our practice group. And with that additional insight and then specific strategies for how to communicate in a way that works better with the different styles, that was really what came out of the process. And there's been, ongoing subsequent coaching, which in my case is with somebody from Caliper, and with my practice group leaders, I'm coaching them on their issues and going over a specific list of usually 3 specific objectives with measurable items and time frames. I meet with the people I'm coaching every couple of months, and we talk about incidents that have occurred that implicate the issues they're working on and whether they went well, whether they were improved in their approach, whether they had issues that we ought to talk about and maybe they could do better. Just by virtue of declaring to other people in the firm that I want feedback, I'm interested in it, I'm available to receive it, first anonymously through the 360 and subsequently by asking for it specifically, I think I've really opened up lines of communication that people with the managing partner are probably normally reticent to discuss, and I think that the communication and relationships have improved fairly significantly, and I've gotten feedback from a number of people within the firm that they have noticed a dramatic change, and in fact we are now up to our 6-month time frame from the initial 360, and we are all starting to discuss redoing the 360 and comparing and seeing how we've done.
That's excellent, John. When I hear you talk about this, you're obviously, in order for this to work, you have to start with the premise that you want to be very open and certainly flexible. You are clearly very self-reflective, and you want to work really hard at making this happen. It seems to me like you need to have all of those things going on simultaneously in order for this to work.
That's 100% right. This type of process can be extremely helpful to people who are interested in it, committed to it, and willing to work hard to improve. If somebody is not interested, it isn't going to work, and it would be a waste of time, and that would not be a good fit, and it shouldn't be forced on anybody. Our group of 5 people who took the 360 were volunteers. They said they were interested in it. So it was a self-selected group, and in fact, we were very interested in the feedback, and I've seen significant movement with everybody because it was a group that was committed to working hard.
That's phenomenal, John. I've heard you use the word commitment and openness several times, and that's clearly what you and your firm are about. You need that commitment to continually self-improving, is what I'm hearing.
Well, that's exactly right. You have to believe that it's worth the effort to achieve the result. And for me and for most of us, we recognize that both in terms of the firm and its functioning and also as a personal matter, these kinds of improvements can have very significant results with effort.
Mm-hmm. And what it's done, as I've heard you say, it's helped to change people's perceptions of you as well as perceptions of the firm and created a much more open and flexible and engaging environment.
That's right. I mean, again, with our practice group leader group, the meetings have just become completely different than they were. The participation is different. My ability to engage some of the people that were more difficult to engage has improved dramatically, I think, and that's the group that really guides the firm. So it's pretty critical to the success of the firm to get that kind of engagement and buy-in. And I think the result for us has been that there's been much more spreading of the effort and the thought in terms of moving the firm forward instead of just so much of it really relying on me. The whole group is engaged in it, and that dynamic is much more powerful and productive.
So this has become very important strategically in terms of the future growth of your firm.
Oh, absolutely. The improvement of the communication and the relationships and the participation within that group improves the firm's strategy and its future. There's no question about that.
You are in a very unusual position where you're not only benefiting personally and professionally as an individual through this process, but it's also helping you then to become a better coach and so a better manager and executive. You were talking about, how it's often easier to connect and communicate with people when they share your style. Is there a story that you could share with us about how you learned something about maybe yourself as a coach about connecting with someone where the style wasn't necessarily the same, but you learned something about how to connect with them? Because I'm always fascinated by that.
Sure. One of the partners that I work very closely with has a style that is pretty much diametrically different from mine, and we like each other a great deal, and he is very effective and a tremendous lawyer. But our styles were just so different that our working together just wasn't optimal. I would try to deal with things quickly, directly, and he would need time, want to contemplate, not necessarily be interested in resolving things sitting there. So if I really needed something done, we'd have this issue where I'd have to try to figure out how to work with him to move forward. And what I've done is a number of things. First of all, generally understanding the differences in styles has made us appreciate each other more and understand the other's perspective and thought process more. So we come to every discussion with a better appreciation and a better relationship. In addition, and more specifically, whenever I can, I give him a pre-briefing and an opportunity to think about things before we're going to be in a meeting discussing it or before I need him to give an opinion or move forward. And I try to structure as much as possible, and it normally is possible, to give him time, and it allows him to get to the decision on his own comfortably rather than to feel pushed because my time frame may be different than his.
That's excellent, John. Thank you. The idea of you recognizing that and then bringing out the best in both of you is what you end up being able to do by recognizing the stylistic differences.
I think that's exactly right.
Excellent. John, this has been great. Thank you so very, very much.
Patrick, it's my pleasure.
John gave some great insights about how he was able to more clearly understand how his style worked or didn't work with the people around him. I think that's always a great thing to be aware of, Joe. Once you understand your own personality strengths, you're better able to see how those strengths fit in with the people around you. I guess that's where the insights from the Caliper Profile can be tremendously impactful. Joe, can you tell me a little bit more about how you incorporate those insights in terms of what drives and motivates an individual?
In any 360, you'll understand how people perceive your performance and how they perceive your behaviors, and you'll get feedback on that. Mm-hmm. But you don't usually understand as a coach what's really driving and motivating that behavior. Yeah. And when we can include the Caliper Profile personality assessment and see some of the characteristics that drive and motivate that behavior, it becomes easier for the participant to understand perhaps why he or she is being seen seen that way, why their behavior is perceived in a certain way. And it's oftentimes because that's who they are. And we don't necessarily want to change ourselves, but what we want to do is focus more on our strengths, our areas that are very positive and that are perceived positively, and minimize those areas where it's tough for us, or take some little steps to begin to change behaviors and start improving those areas. The most important thing is the insight, and I think people become more self-aware when they're understanding what drives and motivates the behavior that people are perceiving. And so that's the beauty of having the Caliper Profile embedded as part of this 360 process.
That's so interesting, Joseph. So what you have are the objective views of people around you, and you can see them rated, whether it's your supervisor or people who are reporting to you or your peers or your customers or clients, as you said. Are most people consistent through that, or do you find a lot of variations?
I often find variations in the different reporting groups. I just had a 360 with someone where it was very apparent that they managed up well because the person's direct supervisor and then the manager above that person both gave ratings to this individual, all very high, thought very highly of this person in all 4 competency areas that we discussed. Whereas the direct reports had a real problem with this manager. And it turned out that, in fact, the manager was just wonderful at explaining what he and his department were doing to his manager, but wasn't so good at explaining things and taking the time to work with and develop his direct reports. So it was a red flag. It was, okay, now I know what I'm good at and what I'm comfortable with, but what I need to do as a manager now is pay a little more attention to my direct reports and communicate with them as much as I communicate with upper management.
I'm thinking as I'm hearing you talk about this, Joe, that so much of this has to do with how much can we really change. And oftentimes we have to change as we move into different positions because what got us where we were isn't necessarily going to be able to help us as we go forward. How do you help somebody get over that hurdle or through that?
Yes, exactly. Well, it's funny because we can all fall prey to this, to overusing our strengths. And this individual that I was discussing with you as an individual contributor was A+, was a top performer because they were a perfectionist. They got everything done. They got it done in a quality way as well. So that was what made them a high performer, made management take note of their performance, and actually caused this person to get promoted. Now you get into a management role and suddenly your strengths are actually not your strengths anymore because that ability to do things yourself, manage your own time, get things done when you want and how you want is no longer the case because 75% of what managers do should be developing their direct reports. And that requires that, in fact, you don't do things yourself, that you help coach people to learn and to grow and to do things themselves. So it's a different mindset. So you've got to have sort of a paradigm shift. And in order to do that, you need some insight. It's not so easy to tell someone who was a great individual contributor, okay, now shift how you're thinking. It takes oftentimes understanding how people are perceiving what you're doing as a wake-up call to understand, oh, this isn't working for me any longer as a manager. I do need to change things. Now, your core personality isn't likely to change. You're absolutely right when you mentioned that. But your personality drives different behaviors. So we can talk about how you might be likely to behave based on your personality, but behaviors can be changed. As we know with Maslow's theory, you can change behaviors over time.
This intrigues me so much in terms of how much we can change. And obviously we have to want to change first, and then to work with someone, a coach such as yourself, where there's a real connection. Can you give me another example on how you may have helped someone change to get from where they are to where they need to be?
Sure, Patrick. One of the behaviors that is asked to be rated in the interpersonal section of the 360 is cooperates with others. That's a behavior that's very important in an organization and in a team environment, that you are perceived as collaborating with others and cooperating with them. One of the individuals that I work with has a difficulty with that and wasn't really aware of it until the 360 ratings came out, and she saw that her peers said that she wasn't very cooperative, that she didn't collaborate well with them, that she appeared to be arrogant at times and